Thank you, Denise. Good morning. Welcome everyone. We will have a moment of prayer and then we'll introduce and get into our topic. Thank you.
Please join me in prayer. Gracious and holy God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the opportunity to gather. We know that you are with us in all seasons of our life. And so we thank you for this chance to explore and talk about, learn new things and to be educated about ways that we can support not just ourselves, but one another. And we thank you for this community of support during times of challenge. And so, Lord, we ask that our hearts and minds may be open to all that you would reveal to us today. These are the blessings we ask in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. So welcome as we continue our exploration of the issues involved with aging. It is with great pleasure that I reintroduce Venus Masalam, who is her current specialty is aging. She is a practice member of the and leader of the New School of Psychiatry in Washington, where when she first started her practice, it was in child psychology, but she's progressed through the developmental stages. And I won't take any more of your time because we have a lot to think about and talk about, and we're so grateful to you, a relatively new member who has given her time and effort in so many ways to helping our congregation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and welcome everyone. I'm talking today, and I want to say the difference in today's presentation is that last week I used other people's ideas, but I developed them together. So I made it into a comprehensive whole. These ideas are coming from me. So I just want you to know that you're understanding. But the point of this today is to help provoke and ideas in you and thoughts that you have about aging, because it's a wide open field. It hasn't been researched very much. It never was very well appreciated. And it's only been recently that's been seen as part of the developmental lifespan, which is through our whole life. Because in our youth-oriented culture, that's really where the energy has gone. But with the fact that by 2050, 25% of our population is going to be over 65, that's pretty daunting. We have to really pay attention to what is happening. And we are, most of us here, I think, are part of it, but I don't want to.
We'll be, well, I think we will be.
Yeah, they will be at some point, yes. So I just want to say a few things about what I said last week, because in case you didn't hear last week's talk, I wanted to at least bring you up to date in terms of how you view the aging developmental stage. It's I used Bernice Newgarten's material. She was at the University of Chicago, and she started to notice in the mid-50s that longevity was happening. And so she started to pay attention to what was going on. And she talked about the three phases. And there's a couple of ways to remember the three phases. One is the young old starts at 55 to 74. The old is 75 to 84, and the oldest old is 85 plus. And now with the centurions being the oldest, the largest group that's growing, I'm sure the phases are eventually going to become stages, but they aren't at this point. And there was a fellow in DC who was working with the elderly in housing, and he made the distinction of the three groups as the first, the go-go group, second, the go-slow group, and third, the no-go group. So that might be an easier way for a lot of people, you know, because it has a little lilt to it. And the other thing is SOC. So what does SOC mean? Well, Paul Baltes was a German sociophysiologist. And he came to this country and taught in the Midwest for a while. And he talked about the fact that as we age, we all lose different abilities. And so the whole process for us as we age is constantly adapting to our losses. So when he said SOC, he meant selection, optimization, and compensation. And I used the example of Matisse, the famous artist who used oil, and as he aged could no longer do it. But when he was living in a caregiving place and the nuns were taking care of him, they gave him the scissors and the paper. And he was able to do those paper cutouts. So he selected still his artwork, but he compensated because he could no longer paint by making these cutouts, which have become very famous as well. So those are two things. And the third is the tasks. Eric Erickson talked about the fact that we have crises through each developmental stage. I'm not looking at these as necessarily crises as much as tasks that we need to pay attention to. And so when I say mutuality and
Reciprocity.
thank you. It takes a southerner to straight. Okay, so anyway, so the point is that as we age, we still need to work at making friends. We can't forget that. We have to do that. And it can be your own relative, grandchildren, nieces, whatever. You need to have friends of different ages and different people, and you need to be able to give back to them. Don't expect them all to take care of you. Versus isolation and bitterness. Then continued generativity versus emptiness. As we age, one of the things we do that gives us a lot of pleasure and restores our own souls in a sense is giving back to the community, to your families, to everything. So that goes through all of the phases, the 3 phases. Then this anticipatory socialization and planning for death versus confusing vacuum. You know, if you don't really address the fact that you are going to die, which I hate, but it's gotta face it, you're stuck. And if you're able to say, hey, I've got to think about this. I've got to, actually, one of the things I have up there is actually mourning it. You know, I can actually tell sometimes when I'm crying, I might think I'm crying about something else, but you know what? I'm crying for myself because I realize I'm not going to know what's going to happen to my grandchildren when they get older and get married and have kids. So there are things that we need to pay attention to, feelings that we have that we don't always identify. They're really important. And when I talk about anticipatory socialization, we do that in the birthing process. You know, we have showers, we do all kinds of things to get ready. But for dying, we don't do anything. You know, we sort of wait. Instead of having rituals that we do, like say when we're 70, 80, start giving away things we don't use anyway that we're going to give to people. I'm not suggesting, I mean, you're all probably more clever than I am in terms of what rituals you want to do, but it's really important to think about because we haven't instituted these kinds of practices in our society, and we need to. And also living in the present and with future fantasy versus just past memories. All right, so say 55 to 85 and up. That's more than 35 years. You're going to live with your memories. You're not going to create new ones. You're not going to think of other things you want to do. So it's really up to us to make sure that we make the most of the time we have. It's really important. And then transitioning beyond one losses and not being arrested in limitations, because it's so easy to say, I can't do that. You know, I can't do this. And once you start saying that, even like driving a certain place, oh, I can't do that anymore. You stop and you didn't realize you actually stopped yourself from doing it. And so transitioning beyond one losses and not being arrested in limitations is key. But some phases more than others, self-actualization versus biding time. I think the first phase, the youngest phase, is the easiest time if you have dreams and aspirations that you've never accomplished, to think about doing that, because it really is a time you have more energy, and your energy does diminish as you age. It's a given. And seeking self-transcendence and wisdom, trying to understand, what is this all about? What have I been given? What have I still to do? Versus frozen rigidity. And the last thing I'm talking about, and I'll bring this up again because it's so important, is the end of life discussions with your family and friends versus denial. It's so important. I know anytime I bring it up with my kids, they're ready to kill me. It's like, oh my, do you have to go there? But yes, I have to go there. I don't know if they listen to me, but I have to go there anyway. Okay, so that's the review. So what am I talking about when I talk about the culture gap? This is something I noticed. You want to move the slide? Okay, there, okay. Our society is not keeping up with the changing life conditions. I mean, if you just look at a little thing, you look at how many handicap parking there is in this church's parking lot. You know, there's not going to be enough already. And people aren't necessarily thinking about that. In other words, things are changing around us and we aren't in touch with what's going on. That's what I'm talking about, a culture gap. There's things that are happening that mentally we have not kept up with. And like the technological improvements that we'll need to have taken care of us. For example, with healthcare, baby boomers will be in greater numbers. And one of the things they know about that most of us have more than one chronic illness. So that multiplies. It isn't just one person. It's one person with all these issues. Okay. And there's going to be a greater need for healthcare of all degrees. Healthcare is not keeping up with it. Even when I was in my training and training people, it was never a sexy subject, One of my colleagues said, "Why are you studying it, Venus? It's so boring. We're all doing it." I said, "Well, I'm either going to study it or get very depressed." So I studied it, and I don't find it boring. I find it actually very interesting. It's a little sad, but it's very interesting. Then, there are societal changes are going on. It used to be that men needed to be older than women. I mean, that was a given. Women were encouraged to marry older men because they were established, they could take care of them, they could have families with them. But that's not longer the case. Many women can be single parents, can work, take care of children, do everything. So, I mean, we really haven't caught up psychologically or emotionally. Societal changes that are going on. That's what I'm talking about when I say the culture gap. People get it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So this is raising our consciousness. In a sense, I was very active in the consciousness raising group in the 60s for women in the 70s. And to me, it's really the same thing, that we're trying to get ourselves in touch with what's going on today and to pay attention to it. Consider the difference in genders in the workforce and educational level that existed in the 50s and 60s. I remember when I went for my master's degree, I'm trying to think of when that was, anyway. But there was only 1% of women going for graduate degrees, 1%. And now they're outpacing the men. So, I mean, how are we paying attention if we don't know that in this generation? Then women no longer need a husband to support them or let them own property. Marriages are on the decline, cohabitation's increasing. Having children as well as the number is on decline. Single mothers can have and raise a family in their own. And men are becoming more comfortable with the idea of staying at home dads. I know I had that happen in two of my children's families, that the women had the jobs and the men stayed home. And eventually we expected them to go to work. They didn't want to have to, but they did. Okay. So women's higher level of education makes it easier to find employment, not a question. But relationships are a key factor in supporting longevity. And the thing that's interesting, it wasn't until the beginning of this century that they even paid attention to relationships. Everything was based on how you were physically. Well, then they started to realize if you have support when you're recovering from surgery, you recover faster, better, everything. They started to realize that you lived longer if you had someone that you were in mutual communication over life and how it's going. I mean, so relationships are really key. And there's one, I love to quote this one. There was one study that I looked at years ago that Duck had done, where he interviewed a number of aging adults. And come to find out, in terms of relationships, he said one good friend was worth 12 grandchildren. Don't forget that when you're upset with your grandchildren or your children. Okay, so it's not just us. Okay, so additional feelings accompanying aging. And I put the top one as invisibility, because I've been in a number of groups where both men and women were participating and both talked about how they felt they were invisible. That people just said, you know, you go to the doctor's office, should you bring your child, you know, your 60-year-old child? And they look right past you and they talk to your child, right? It's like you don't exist, but it's your body they're talking about. Those kinds of things are really annoying. And that's for both men and women. When I said invisibility, it isn't just women. You know, our society is so youth-oriented. It's like, forget it. If you pass a certain age, you might as well jump off. Anyway, so with graying, you're fading, you know, I mean, that's what happens. So there's a loss of control. And, you know, things that happen, like you start getting afraid of driving. I've happened to me. I had trouble with my knee from an ice storm on the Beltway. And now anytime I have to be in a lot of traffic, it just seizes up on me. Doesn't make me happy. But the one thing, and then it's sort of like I became very conscious that I had one foot in this life and one foot thinking about where I might be going next. And that's what I'm talking about, that awareness that death is waiting. It's sort of like it shadows you. You don't want it to, but it does. Anyway, the thing that I think needs to be studied is the amount of increased anxiety that comes with aging, because it limits you in more ways than you know. And people don't think of it, particularly doctors don't think of it as like an issue when you go for your general checkup. Anxiety is very diminishing of our whatever we're going to be doing. It's just diminishing. Okay, let's see if I get this right now. I have relationships and entertainment. Is that next?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. The reason I picked relationships and entertainment is in our society, if our friends are doing it, we don't necessarily pay attention. But if someone in the, you know, entertainment field is doing it, then we all notice it because it's shoved down our throats. Okay, so I was thinking, when I was growing up, Burt Reynolds, I don't know if any of you remember him. And Dinah Shore, right? So they had met and he was apparently dazzled when he met her. She was very bubbly and cute. And so he tried to invite her out for the weekend and she wouldn't do it. Because she had been divorced twice. I didn't know that at the time. But anyway, they met a while later in Chicago. And I love her quote because it's so on target. When she was questioned about how come she changed her mind, she said, a human relationship has nothing to do with chronology. I want you all to remember that because that is one of the changes in the future that's going to be big time. It has to do with chemistry, said Dinah, who felt the connection to a man is a man is a man. Do you know that? An attraction is an attraction. So that's the reality. It either happens or it doesn't. It has nothing to do with age. Or it may have something to do with it. All right, so and I'm going on. More current is Demi Moore and Ashton Kutcher. And in the early 2000s, who made headlines for their 15-year gap in their public breakup. They met at a friend's house and then they were married for 6 years and divorced. And it's interesting to me because people blame the divorce on the fact that there was this big age gap. But a lot of people got married and were divorced in 6 years. It had nothing to do with age. It had to do with what the relationship was. So we're always willing, there's something about it. It's like we don't want what we grew up with to change. You know, men should always be older, and guess what? Gotta watch out, those women are coming out. And there are more women that are aging. I mean, you know, there's, it's not, I'll tell you something, what happened, and I'll talk, I don't know if I already talked about the research, but when the research came out and successful aging was, the fact that people stopped smoking, particularly men, and stopped drinking. Men were doing better and the age gap diminished between the death of women and men. You know, so when you see that young man on the bicycle, you know, he's gonna live longer than the guy that was smoking a cigarette. Anyway, so, and to prove my point about that, men are much more sensitive to it now too. George Clooney and his marriage to Amal, the very accomplished lawyer, and she's gorgeous, by the way. Anyway, he's very upset about how he's aging and realizing what a difference there is between his energy, and they have 2 twins, and hers, and he's worried about it. It's bothering him. But it's unusual to have that listed in the entertainment field. They're acknowledging it, and I've never heard of a man going around being upset about aging. Anyway, but the thing is, there's just such an emphasis in our society on physical, youthful demands, and that, you know, that's what you're supposed to be, youthful for the rest of your life. I don't know. But you didn't see that emphasis in France. And it's hard to imagine Macron with his wife being his teacher, that he's married, and the amount of years they have between them.
Yeah.
It would never happen in this country. I don't think so. Anyway, so my point is relationships are shifting, and it's gonna be based on different things. As I said, marriage is losing favor, cohabitation is increasing. Not everyone wants children anymore. It used to be a given. If you got married, you're supposed to have children, right? Companionship is the most crucial variable in aging for any of us. Having someone by your side who cares about you on a daily basis, being there, you can't replace that. And it's very, very important. Desirability is based on factors of health, appearance, fitness, mental alertness, and sociability. Older women, these are quotes I got off of Google. They asked men why they thought older women were more attractive. And they said older women can be less demanding, based on men's comments, and they have monies of their own, and they do not wish to offer being a purse or a nurse. So, okay, so that's the area. There are multiple areas that are shifting that we haven't really thought about. And it used to be, when I was growing up, 55 was it. Everyone knew 55, you just retired. Well, that's no longer the case. People don't realize how expensive retirement is. You don't suddenly have no costs just because you're retired. And if you keep your own home, you've got a lot of costs. So you have to be able to think about, can I retire and live in a style that I'm used to living in? It's a really important thing, because this is supposed to be the golden time of our lives, right? And you don't want to be suffering in it if you don't have to. So you need to think about, at some point, and this will be true for the upcoming different phases. Should I be retraining? Should I be thinking of a different kind of work to be doing now? And it's a very easy thing to do. You don't think about it, but it really isn't that difficult to change career paths. But the important point is that having a purpose, no matter how simple, is a requirement for successful longevity. If you don't have a purpose and you're just getting up every day and you aren't even watering a plant, forget it. You know, I mean, it's just, you've got to have some kind of purpose. How am I doing?
You're doing great.
Okay. Continuing to have a
You've got a
purpose.
purpose. For sure.
Continuing to have a purpose for living is important. Assessing one's motivation and desires is a valuable exercise at every stage in life. You should always be saying, hey, am I doing what I want to do? Is this what I want to do with my life? I was talking with a colleague who said to me, our responsibility as therapists and in helping our clients is to help them be whoever they are, the more of it. So that's what I'm trying to do. Okay. All right, so think about your retirement. All right, other areas needing updating beside relationships and retirement are relocation. And what does that mean? Well, we all know, we start saying, oh, have you looked at the latest place where, they're sending seniors? And some are for caregiving, some are just to have a place to live with other people of like age and might possibly like interest. But the thing that's got a new twist, I mean, a lot of people, we took it for granted in the beginning of the 20th century, people were mostly on farms or in housing and people died in their homes.
Mhm.
But when it shifted to going to hospitals and things like that, we sort of pushed death into those places and we didn't have to deal with it anymore. Well, people are realizing they'd rather die at home now and trying to figure out how that happens. And one of the things that is happening in our neighborhoods all around us are the villages. And the village's purpose is to help you age in your home. And it's really important, if you haven't thought about it, to be in contact with those people. There's usually a small fee and they provide wonderful resources in terms of rides to the doctors. And you can also be helping some of your own neighbors. So they're really important things that are going all around in Maryland and in DC and sure in Virginia as well. So, and throughout the country. One thing that's happening in Europe that has, at least that I don't know of, that I don't believe is happening here yet. In Europe, they're developing small communities for people with cognitive loss and Alzheimer's to be living together with paid professionals, making sure they're safe. And that's a very wonderful idea because that's very different than going to, being in an enclosed, locked situation when you can go and get your hair done in your own little community. I mean, there's just much more humane attention to how we should be paying attention to aging. The one thing that's really causing a very strong complication, because it's hurtful in many ways, aging adults are struggling. Some of my clients, struggle with, my husband's going to need total care and I can't do it, which means I have to put him in a facility where he's going to get that. But I don't want to go to that facility, even if there's one for people who don't need care. I want to stay where I am. This is a real issue and very painful for people making that decision. And they need a lot of support. We have to figure out how to do these things, as I say, in a more humane way. I mean, as Americans, we haven't got a lot of lip service in my mind. But I don't think we're very humane. We talk about the family and yet we haven't done much to help support families, in terms of health care and child care and on and on. And, anyway, I'm not gonna get into it. It's not my topic. Okay, so.
Should I go back or?
Yeah, all right, so. Social activities, and I'm not gonna go through each one of these, you know what they are: dining, movies, concert, family events, holidays, and travel. These are things we could do collectively, and hopefully we have someone to do them with. And if you're taking care of someone who can't do it, it gets to be very complicated again. And so it really requires care and thought about how can you provide opportunities, say for someone who's struggling with Parkinson's, to go to dinner when you're concerned that they might fall down, you don't know how they're going to be, and yet they're dying to get out. They want to get out. And it's very painful if they can't, because they feel like life is passing them by, but they're still alive and they need that attention and that experience. So it's important when I talk about social activities for within families and friends to really talk about, how can we make some of these things happen? What do we need to do? So that's the only reason I put them all up. They were concerned I had a whole bunch of lists I was gonna go over minutia, but I'm not. I'm leaving it up to you to figure it out, okay? All right, next. This is a particularly difficult time for widows, widowers, and long-term friendships. Because these kinds of things may happen. This is a time when if you've ever needed somebody close by, when you lose them. And it's devastating. I know I've just gone through it. It's extremely painful. And there's no single reaction. Everyone has their own way to react to what it is. But these are just some of the things that may happen. That you're people who are in close proximity and life together. You know, Kurt Vonnegut in the 50s wrote a book, Cat's Cradle, and in it he talked about couples that he called a Dupre. And the Dupre were couples that had lived together long and closely. And that when one of them died, the other one soon followed within a year. And it still happens. And I remember that because I read that when I was in college. So for some reason, it made a big impact on me. But so you don't just lose that other person, you also lose a part of yourself when you lose that person. So it affects your sense of self-identity, self-worth. And for some, it can be like when you lose a job or you're laid off, and we know that's going to happen to a lot of people right now. You know, the status that they had from that job. I even worry, you know, when I say when I'm going to retire, can I still say I'm a retired psychologist? I mean, what am I going to say? My identity is very much tied up with my profession as well. So, I mean, it's a real issue for men and women. And also, there's like such a level of vulnerability. It's so easy to see why aging adults, particularly those who have lost someone recently, become victimized. Just so ready to have something good happen. The feelings of isolation and loneliness become constant companions. And while family is essential, it cannot fill the void. It really can't. We might try to make it, you know, and being grandparents and everything, but it's not the same as having someone by your side. And this is for friends, not just for widow and widowers. This is for relationships that have gone on for a long time. All right, so I'm coming up to the end. Living well, the ingredients, okay? Your physical health, we all, you know, we're always getting things about you should eat this, you shouldn't eat that, you better exercise. I mean, there are just things we hear over and over again, which we should be doing, but do we always do them? That's up to you to know. Anyway, and sexuality, why did I put that in there? Well, because we have a tendency, you know, just as we think aging people are becoming invisible. My colleague told me when he was training, he was an orderly in a home for elderly. And at one time he noticed something going on in one of the rooms. And the guy came out and he said, oh, they were trying to get together. And they were married, by the way. These people were married. And this guy was going to go in and interrupt them because obviously they shouldn't be doing that at their age. Anyway, who can believe it? I can believe it in this country. Anyway, but the point is about sexuality. Some things diminish. I mean, you know, they'll say at age 60, a lot of men have difficulty having erectile functioning. People want to still have babies. And some people who meet each other, the women, no longer can do that. These are all part of our sexuality and our identity and who we are. The one thing you don't lose, if you allow yourself to keep it and understand it, is desire. Because that's not based all on physical. I mean, it could be that you're tired and you don't feel good, but that's different. Desire is something that goes on. I mean, otherwise, there wouldn't be all the problems in the caregiving places with the STDs. And they don't study this much. And we know it's a factor. So somebody's got desire. Something's going on that we're not paying attention to. And I was looking around and thinking, you know, a church with its aging population could be a petri dish too. We are not paying attention. And we need to, it's real. And we need to support people through this life stage. It's very important. And the thing that's so crazy to me, you know, granted the Puritans came, and coming from Boston, believe me, I know their impact. But it still exists in our society. We still have a hard time talking about sex and sexuality. It's like it's a foreign language. We don't know what to do with. So we got to get over that. Okay, guys, we got to get over it. The thing also in terms of the threat to healthcare services is that we're not going to have the ones we all need. If they cut out on immigration, who's going to be taking care of us? You think your kids are going to fill the gap? Forget it. Not going to happen. So there's just a lot of things when we want to say living well, you have to think about. You have to think about who's going to take care of you? How do you want to be taken care of? Where do you want to die? And I'll get into this more next. But your emotional well-being, oh, social health and relationships, maintain those. They're incredibly important to your life and you need them. Okay. I didn't talk about conscientiousness. I didn't talk about the big five, actually, which become big six personality variables that make a difference. Conscientiousness is one of the ones that's most helpful in aging well. And it requires you to be able to, people who are conscientious tend to make good choices. They tend to listen to their doctors and do what their doctors tell them. They usually pick good partners, but they're just more consistent and methodical in how they live, and they live better. All right, so environmental issues, you know, where are you living? Is it conducive to healthy living? As we were talking about the fact that what you're doing, even in terms of your work, could be contributing to your ill health if you're exposed to toxins all the time. I just went and had my nails done yesterday, and thinking about the people that were inhaling all that stuff all the time, that can't be healthy. Cultural, you want to pay attention to what messages you continue to live by. Have you changed your messages that you got from being an adolescent? You know, like, what were you told when you were an adolescent? What was the messages you got that still float around in your head that you're not thinking about, that can still impact you and have no use at this day and age? That's a cultural impact. You have to think about that. We have to be ready to change it. Okay. And the last one is dying well. This top thing is so important. Educate oneself on the life-saving procedures that rob one of the quality of life once you've had them. When my mother was dying, they kept on giving us these permissions to do this thing and that thing. There was no way that woman was going to live once they took that machinery off of her. But they never said that. They never told us. They didn't prepare us. So, you know, my siblings and I were fighting with each other. Should we do this? You know, because my mother at that time hadn't done anything about a life directive. So it's really important to know, because I've also been told that tube feeding doesn't always guarantee you're going to come back when you're on tube feeding either. So you need to really know what are the procedures, what's their impact on my life, and do I want to do it? Is it worth it? Then understand all the services of hospice. Not everything in hospice means you're dying. Many people go get hospice services and recover. So you need to know what's available. Then what I had said about having those difficult conversations with family or friends for your ending. Go and visit the transitional caregiving sites. And again, that anticipatory socialization. Think about what you would like as a ritual in terms of your family. Think about the things you're not using that you might want to give to them now. not wait. It's much nicer to get something from someone living than just to be given it once they're dead. So you need a living will and advance directives. Your wills and your trusts, make sure that you put whoever your beneficiaries are on anything you own. Put that on. It counts beyond wills. Okay, then memorial service. Think about what you want. Do you want a memorial service or not? It's okay to think about it. I mean, some people plan inch by inch what they want to have happen. All right, and is it gonna be burial or cremation or what? What do you want? Now they know they can bury you in some of these green cemeteries where you just rot and be the earth. So these are the things you need to be thinking about in terms of dying well. And I'm sure there's more to this, but those are the things I came up with. So that's it.
Thank you. There have been, Brigitte would like to say something, and I'm gonna take the slideshow down if that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And do we need to change the settings so that we can
Yeah.
see folks? There have been a number of comments in the chat
Oh,
as
okay.
well.
Good.
And maybe I'll recognize Joni first, because she is repeating some information that she sent me during the week, but just to let you know, I will recognize you in just a minute. But Joni, do you want to speak first about some of the information that you put in the chat?
I don't care either way, whatever you want.
You can go ahead.
Okay, so last week somebody talked about how do you find people to help you?
Oh,
And
yeah.
and so I listed out, 3 different agencies that I had worked with that are very reliable, and they may be able to, they're not cheap, let me just say, but they can help you find, solidify your plans. And that might even include financially, to find somebody to pay bills and stuff like that. The other thing, I also mentioned the villages. I think you can, get help from your friends in the villages to find different ways of helping, and they may know people for financial planning and so forth. But you really have to be careful when you're giving up your control of your money, because you may need it, and there
Yes.
are reliable people around. The other thing about the death and dying part of this, somewhere on the Bradley Hills website, there is a form that you can, there are several different forms. One is you can list where all of your possessions are, including the key to your safe deposit box and, your, I don't know, just everything that somebody would need when you die, all the information.
Where's the will?
The other thing, where's the will, Larry just said. The other thing is that there's a form that to help you pre-plan your funeral if you want to. And it, maybe your favorite hymns or your favorite scriptures and things like that. I don't know where on the website it is because things move around, but it's there. And perhaps the secretary can help you. Okay, that's
Yes. And I also have the financial information that you said about from financial managers. Okay, we'll get Pam Hemmers in a minute, but Brigitte, do you have a question or a comment?
Well, one comment is, I wanted to thank you. And I think I think it falls under personality, a good sense of humor, and it comes through in your presentation. I think that is helpful and I think helpful to cultivate that and appreciate that in yourself and other people. And one thing that just struck me when you mentioned human relationships, my profession was at the other end of life with children, and that in the NICU, in the neonatal intensive care unit, babies do better when they have
Same thing.
close
Yeah,
physical
sure.
and emotional contact. So it really is the whole lifespan. And so, and that struck me several times in your presentation, you know, that it's not just Wendy, but it's
Right.
something. You know.
And just to add to that, I think we've got a lot to learn. We've got a lot to learn in so many areas, but I have a friend whose husband's been suffering from Alzheimer's for 12 years now. But we have learned that he has a caregiver, and she's taught him to look at things, to read, to be in constant relationship with different people, and his whole way of being and is much improved. Getting that attention really does matter.
Absolutely.
And anyway, yeah. Pam Hammers, did you want to tell people a little bit about what you've learned? You had put something in the chat and we can't all see it, so.
Oh, she's
You're
muted.
gonna have to unmute yourself. Well, maybe I can do it for you.
She hasn't unmuted or something.
Yeah, I know, here, wait a minute, Pam, we've got to find you and unmute you, if you don't know how to do that. There we go.
And do it now. There we go.
Okay, good, great.
Okay. What was your question about my working?
You had put something in the chat. Did you want to share that?
Yeah.
The people in the room can't see the chat, so.
Okay. Oh,
Wanted
okay.
to share it just briefly, yeah.
Oh, I just said that, you know, I worked for Potomac Home Support. It's part of Johns Hopkins. It's a, you know, I take people to their doctor's appointments. I've worked in a lady's home. She had Alzheimer's, so that, you know, her husband could get out and, you know, do his thing, go grocery shopping, whatever. And I'm all over the place here. I just wanted to say how difficult that was for the caretaker. You know, it was very difficult, because I did everything with her. I made muffins with her. We did art. We took walks, but she would get so angry, and use 4-letter words and tell me to get the H out, you know. And I mean, I was afraid. She was close to the knives. She could have done something to me, you know. Scared, just in my imagination, you know. It never happened.
Well, but I would also say that it's really important that whoever's responsible look at getting medication, getting some help, because there are phases that people go through, and there are ways to treat to make things better. So
she was on diazepam, an anti-anxiety medication, I believe. Yeah. So, but it didn't always help, you know. Right.
Okay, let's see.
Anyway, what else can I say? Oh, can I piggyback on this? My grandson, I actually asked my grandson if he would help with bill paying sometime. I don't even know if that was a good idea, but he's the best one in math in the family. And, you know, I just thought, I didn't know if that was, maybe Dr. Venus, you can tell me if that was a wise thing to do or not.
Okay, could you repeat what you just said, that someone could help with paying the bills?
Right.
Yeah.
How old is he?
I asked my grandson to do that, you know. I don't know if you heard that.
How old is he?
He's 23, very, very responsible. But you know, and I even took him out to lunch and I said, oh, could you do this? And he said, you know, because it's a matter of putting his name on the checking account. I mean, we're not in a rush for this, but I was just thinking ahead, you know.
Yeah.
Or if it would make it difficult for my son and my relationship, you know, that's a problem too, right?
Well, if anything happened, it could make it difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, if anything negative happened. That's the only concern. I'm
That's
not
the-
suggesting that your grandson is not reputable, but you also don't want to put him in a position where it would be something he might need. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Temptation.
Yeah, right.
I
Thank you.
have a question
You know,
on that.
go ahead, Diane.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know if that's helpful.
Sort of semi-related. I know that when you have elders who have lost their capacity to manage their finances, many times they will, if they have children, they will appoint their child who lives nearby to
Yes.
be the durable power of attorney, so that, and they will have them put on banking accounts
Yes.
and other accounts so that they can help take care of those things. And, but if you're, I would assume this is more of a relationship issue. If you're asking a grandchild versus a child, that doing just that task, that gets into the power of attorney, I would think. I don't know. I
Right.
don't.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, I just wanted to say one thing. Louise Meyer has found the forms on the Bradley Hills website. So those information forms
Wow.
are there for those who are remote. It's in the information's in the chat. So I'll say that. And then, Rick, go ahead and ask the question.
2 or 3 points, and I hope after the first 2, I remember the third one. I want to really thank you, Trina, for, first of all, becoming a member of this
Thank you.
community of
Yeah.
faith and offering up your wonderful information. You really hit a chord here. Last week, I noticed online there were 41 people that were watching it online. I don't know how many in the room. And today, I think, I can't remember, I think it's 26 plus another 15 here. So
20,
you really
20,
did a-
we're at an all-time, close to an all-time high for recent
Point
recent
that I
programs. So,
hope
yeah.
what you've started here with these 2 presentations continue on. I applaud your courage. I applaud the way you go about your presentation here. It's really practical and meaningful to a lot of people. And before you started, you said, what do you think about aging? And I thought for a moment, I said, aging must be pretty good because everybody's doing it. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Linda Koska just mentioned that her mother had Alzheimer's and the medication was very difficult. You had to tweak it a lot, and that was challenging. I just like to put in a personal note, having had a lot of situations with that have come with aging, I think, and having cancer is one, but before that, having enough I guess chutzpah to try to find out what my real talents were. And I started taking art classes and I had painted in high school, but hadn't really gotten back to it. And I found as time progressed, things weren't perfect at the beginning, but I still am playing and experimenting, but really loving and finding a whole part of myself that I didn't really know existed. And I can't encourage other folks enough to, have a self-confidence. You can't really fail at it. So you'd be surprised. There might be some wonderful aspects of your life that you haven't tapped yet. You've been working all this time. It's okay to be retired. And yeah, Mila?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'd like to know what your thoughts are about the implications of technology in terms of communication with the aging process, because I'll just be brief. My mother's 96 and my father, who died a long time ago, made sure that they both learned how to use computers in the 1980s. And she's very hard of hearing. I've inherited that. That's why I pulled up close so I could hear you. And she is extremely dependent on email for interaction with people. I've got sort of multiple questions swirling in my head, but one is, men used to not live as long as women. Men typically were not as good at developing relationships. We have more people living alone than ever before. And men, if they're living alone, don't have those relationships as much as women do to depend on and interact, be connected with society. It's sort of a mix of things going in my head, but as we age, I'm seeing it with my mother, the ability to use the technology diminishes significantly. She panics when something isn't familiar
Working.
on her screen. I'm her IT help desk almost every day. And I just think, you know, if you're living alone and therefore you're more dependent on email or texting or whatever, but your capacity to use it diminishes as you age and you're living alone, what is it? Of course, the technology will probably change, but I'm just wondering if you've had thoughts or done research on the dependence on technology for interaction as we age, what happens?
Well, I haven't, and many people that I know are aging are not adept. That's one of the difficulties, that many are not. But when your mother's situation, the fact that when it goes, that has more to do with that issue I talked about with anxiety, how it diminishes you. It isn't the technology that's diminishing her, it's her own anxiety. So that's what she needs help with. I don't know if she's seen someone to help her with her anxiety or not.
If I may chime in, I have a client who's 92 and is beginning to have some cognitive failing. Otherwise, she's really active, but she has trouble with technology, but she has a guide. You know, she found someone to come in and help with tech stuff when it's necessary. Now, your mom may not can do that.
$100 an hour, $130.
Yeah. It is $100. I have one too.
$130.
Yeah.
They help.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I tell her, just call me, but you know, I get
Yeah.
all of it. But I'm trying to get the screen sharing set up, so
Yeah, that's an important piece.
but anyway, it just more broadly than my mother's situation, I'm just wondering in the big picture, you know, the dependence on technology, the isolation of living alone, these are trends.
Yeah,
And what are the implications for an aging, you know, where the demographic of the aged is growing?
well, you know, when we talk about the villages too, we haven't talked about the fact that maybe some of the things that need to happen is that people visit other people, so they have human contact, because I don't think there's any question that when you have human contact, it's much more impactful and keeps you more alert and with it. So your mother may need company, and I'm not just saying you, but you might want to see if the villages, there are people who are willing to visit with your mom. You know, and there may be people who are very good with computers that might want to visit, and I'm serious, that might want to visit, because a lot of people like to share their knowledge too. You know, talk about generativity, it is giving back.
Gosh, we're getting close to the end of time and we've only scratched the surface of your background and then those of our community. I
Sure.
mean, is there a last burning question that anybody would like to say? I know we've got a couple. Let me see what the chat.
The grandpad. Linda talks about.
Oh, okay, okay, there's a grand pad that's a version of, this is Linda Koske telling us, it's a version of an iPad for seniors, that it's apparently much more user-friendly, and it's something worth checking out. I mean, I think that the whole area of technology, because
They've got to pay attention.
Yeah, we've got to pay attention to the extent possible, stay up with it, but also get help with it. And because it does maintain personal contact. I mean, I find I have a book club that has 3 90-year-olds in it, and they hate Zoom. But if we didn't have Zoom, we couldn't stay connected, and they have been learning. It's just not, you know, but think about how could we have stayed in touch over the pandemic if we
That's right.
didn't have Zoom, or something like it. And yeah, it's not the same as being together. It's wonderful. So, but a combination is better than nothing. So,
Absolutely, not a
yeah.
question, not a question.
Yeah. So, so if with our time situation, there are so many aspects of what we're talking about that I know we do have 10 people that are able to participate in continuing small group, but I don't think this is going to be the end of this in our community. And I really appreciate everybody's being here and participating. And I just want to have a plug for, well, we're living in quite a world, and I think we've all had quite a week, the last week. We had planned ahead of time to, and we're very, very excited that Dr. Percy Pierre, who is a professor at the University of the Maryland School of Engineering, trailblazer in engineering, first African-American electrical engineer in the United States that we know of. He's been Dean at Howard, Assistant Secretary of Army for Research, and his big contribution is in his real zeal is for mentorships. These are, and he will explain significant mentorships that have made a tremendous difference in the inclusion and performance of minorities in the field of science in the STEM fields. And he will be talking about his success and what we might look at in the future. And we'll be doing this within the context of people having been threatened for even in being included in this kind of thing this last week. And I will be talking to him. I've been looking at what's been happening in the public schools, the height of good things and our challenges right now. So we're going to be having a very stimulating discussion, and this will not be the end of our discussions of how we can deal and support each other in this very trying and scary environment that we're in. So stick with us, come back. Venus, your contribution is just invaluable. It's hard to even begin to thank you. She has spent hours and hours getting ready for us, and what a contribution. And she had a birthday this week, so thank you, Venus.
I'm 86.
That's very good.
You know, aging can be quite a gift. All right, so thank you so much. It's been a great morning.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Cheryl,
Yeah.
my husband was with NASA for 60 years. He was part of that mentorship.
Yeah.
He used to tell me about it.